the martyrdom of a prophet. Do you remember the decision that was made? Porter Rockwell, when he asked him what he thought, said, 19th century phrase, "You make your bed, I'll lie with you. Whatever you say goes, Joseph." Hiram, you're the oldest, what do you think? Hiram, let us go back. The prophet had read the letter indicating the governor's request and had said, if we do that, we are dead men. No, no, says Hiram. Let us go back and trust in God. We will go, the prophet replied, but we shall be butchered. And then there was the moment with Daniel H. Wells not feeling well himself. The prophet stopped. He was not then a member of the church. Squire Wells, I want you to cherish my memory and not think me the worst man either. And Daniel H. Wells could never speak of that incident without weeping, and he became one of our great ones, but he had to give up his family in order to join the church later. And then there was the moment with the little girl who overheard the prophet say as they stopped to ask for a drink of water that morning, Brother Rosencrantz, if I don't come back, always remember I love you. This little girl felt that to her soul and fled and wept on her bed. And then there was that surveying of the entire valley, looking up at the temple, when the prophet said, according to Jedediah, this is the loveliest place and the best people under the heavens. Little do they know the trials that await them. On the road itself, the road to Carthage, there were 3 other sentences that are revelatory, not part of the official history. Isaac Haight records that at one point he was so weighed down he turned to Hiram and said, "Oh, Hiram, let's go back to Nauvoo and die together there." John Lowe Butler records that at one point, about 4 miles out, he commanded, and that's the only way he could get them to obey. But many who had ridden that far with him turn around and go back. They said, "No, Joseph, we'll go with you. We'll take what you take." "No," he said, "you must go." And John Lowe Butler says, as I turned and as we rode away, I felt, as I suppose the ancient disciples of Christ felt, when he said, "I must be crucified." There were many efforts made, legal efforts, even at that stage, to relieve the prophet from his unjust incarceration. None of them availed. Dan Jones went and personally talked to the governor, explaining what he had heard in the secret meetings of those around, and the governor said, "Oh, my friend, you're imagining this." And the Missourians present said, in effect, "If you want us to do the job, we'll do it." And the others said, "If you do it, you will never be brought to justice." 2 or 3 of the prophet's non-Mormon friends, one of them a sea captain, one of them a dentist, were sent missiles asking to come and testify in his behalf. All of them tried, none of them successfully. The only thing he therefore had between him and the final scene was a pistol, which Cyrus Wheelock had brought in. And when Hiram said, "I do not like to see such things used," the prophet replied, "Neither do I, but we may need to defend ourselves." Many anti-Mormon tracts have said it certainly is no example to the Christian world that a man should have claimed to have died as a martyr for Christ who used a gun in the last hours of his life. They do not know either the background or the sequel. The background, in a word, is that the prophet had promised to those brethren in the name of the Lord that he would defend them even if it meant his life. Had he been all alone in the Carthage jail, the story might be different. But he was not. He was there with 2 members of the 12, John Taylor and Willard Richards being over 300 pounds, the largest target and the only one not injured, and with his brother Hiram. And he did defend them as he promised. In fact, we now know from the records that the first man up the stairs that day, anxious and eager, was met by a fist and rolled back down. That fist was Joseph Smith's. Inside the door, they had nothing to defend themselves with except those pistols and 2 walking sticks which they used to divert the rifles up. Some of them went off in the ceiling as a result. But when Jacob Hamlin went to that room the next day and counted the pock marks of the balls that were shot through, well over 56 were there. And all that shooting occurred, according to Willard Richards, in less than 2 minutes. 5 balls entered both Hiram and Joseph, and 4 more John Taylor. It was a volley, an explosive volley. We know that the night before that, the prophet had had some private conversations with the remaining brethren. We know that he had borne his last testimony to the guards of what? Of the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon, he said not long before this, is just what it purports to be. And for this testimony, I expect to give an accounting before the bar of God. We know also that he had pled 3 times with Hiram for Hiram to leave him and go back. And Hiram could only say, Joseph, I cannot leave you. And Hiram, it turned out, was the first to go down. Only this much remains, and I must be through. The question raised, how did the prophet make the decision, which he did make, to leave that room or to try to leave it through the window? There have been films that have depicted Joseph somehow falling off balance out through a large glass plate window. There is no such window. This was a jail. Even the upstairs had walls as thick as 2 feet. It was a small window, and Joseph was a large man. And to get through it required great effort. It is Willard Richards who uses the strangest adverb in the whole account when he says that after that pistol, which misfired twice, was empty, the prophet calmly, that's a strange word, calmly dropped it and went to the window. One man outside the jail, and I don't know how anybody could hear anything in such a fracas, claims he heard the prophet cry, "O Lord, what shall I do?" How fast can a man's mind work in such circumstances? What was going through his? It was certain death at the door. That was clear. It was certain death at the window because bullets were coming through it, and John Taylor had just been blasted under the bed, writhing in pain with 4 wounds. And yet, he decided to get out. Willard Richards believed, hoping that if he could, it might save the lives of those who still were alive. Whether that was his intent or not, he was hit twice from behind, maybe 3 times, and managed, even though he was, to pull himself up and out, and then fell from the window. He's out, someone shouted, and all who had been at the top of the stairs receded and came down. "Shoot him, shoot the damn rascal," said Levi Williams, and they shot 4 times more. But now we return to the explicitly prophetic words of that last hymn or song. It was, in the late days of Nauvoo, the prophet's favorite, a poor wayfaring man of grief. And the last 2 lines are, "These deeds shall thy memorial be. Fear not, thou didst them unto me."